Accessing library computer data.
Out there are no saints. Just people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. We're continuing our run through Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Right now we're up to the episode called The Muse. It is the 21st episode of the 4th season. Aired on April 29th, 1996. Teleplay goes to Renee Echevarria. Story credit goes to Renee Echevarria and Majel Barrett Roddenberry. Directed by David Livingston. In this episode, a mysterious woman helps Jake write a novel. Lwaxana Troi, pregnant with a son, asks Odo to help her escape her husband. We're joined by Clay, who has missed all of the previous Lwaxana Troi episodes on DS9. So this must have been somewhat confusing towards the end of it. But how are you doing otherwise?
I'm good. You know, on this show we have fun. We joke around.
We laugh. We like to laugh.
We laugh. We take things not so seriously. But I want to be serious for 1 second. This episode is the closest I think we've ever gotten to Jake Sisko fuck machine. Like, what is going on with him? He's
was it the line where she's like, "Have you ever been in a woman's quarters unaccompanied by an adult?" And he's like, "No," and she's like, "Well, let's get to writing then."
Yeah, it was like you could extrapolate this as a meta episode where like all of the Jake Sisko stuff was written by Jake Sisko.
Yeah,
and then he realized, oh, I have to show this to people, so I can't put in the part where we just boned down for 3 days.
Let's take a break. We're going to play an audio clip. We're going to come back and we're going to break down the Muse.
Before I met her, my world was a much smaller place. I kept to myself. I didn't need anyone else, and I took pride in that. The truth is, I was ashamed of what I was. Afraid that if people saw how truly different I was, they would recoil from me. Lwaxana saw how different I was, and she didn't recoil. She wanted to see more. For the first time in my life, someone wanted me as I was. And that changed me forever. The day I met her is the day I stopped being alone.
You know, it got me wondering, Clay. I thought and I don't know, I'm not looking this up. I thought that the definition of a muse was just someone who inspired you. Is the definition of a muse supposed to be loaded with sexuality? Is that part of being a muse? Is that you like are inspiring someone by being sexually desirable to them? Like their pursuit of you or their love for you is what is inspiring your greatness? Is that what a muse is? Or is it just a muse is just someone who inspires somebody?
I always thought it was the latter, but usually I have only seen it used in reference to a male creative person who has some sort of female that he is usually involved with in some sexual or relationship capacity, who is in inspiring whatever the creativity. That's the most common way I see it used. Isn't it a Greek mythology thing?
It is. I'm looking at the definition now. So in Greek and Roman, each of the 9 goddesses, the daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, who preside over the arts and sciences. So daughters of Zeus who are sort of into cultural stuff, or they're the gods of culture, basically. The second definition is a person or personified force who is the source of inspiration for a creative artist. So I guess there's no sexual bent to it, although I always feel that it's a sexualized relationship.
Yeah, it seems to be usually portrayed in that manner. I don't know if that's, or at least when it's personified anyway. I mean, there's plenty of times I've heard it used in reference, not that way, but anytime it's depicted like in a dramatic fashion, there's always that element to it.
Mm-hmm. So what'd you think of The Muse?
I I feel like this is the worst episode I've seen all season.
That's generally the feedback. Even a couple patrons say that. This is the worst episode.
And they like everything.
This is the worst episode in a long time. Although I don't think it's a disaster.
No.
So yeah, what did you think? Well, I mean, besides the fact that you thought it was the worst episode in a while, which I think speaks to the quality of the season at this point. What led you down that path?
I mean, maybe part of it was because I don't have any of the history of the Odo and Lwaxana stuff. But it just felt like it felt very much like a season 1 type episode, even down to the creature at the end turning into golden fog and then floating off into space outside of the space station.
Yep. Which
is probably a reused animation from when they set free that like giant jellyfish thing in the first season.
Yeah, same camera pan and everything, right?
Yeah.
It's a bad.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's a bad sci-fi B plot. Rears its ugly head in a while. We haven't seen that in a while, and here it kind of is.
Yeah, I didn't inherently hate the stuff with Jake, but there didn't seem to be a point to it. Also, bullshit that his penmanship is that nice. Because if we've learned anything from the advent of computers, is people can't write for shit anymore.
I know. Get that kid
bullshit.
a word processor or something. I'm amazed that he was writing this all by hand. Maybe the scanning technology's improved in the future, but you got to get that down on hard disk, Jake. I think that's not the only hard disk in this room, but we have to get that thing down. Hey yo, we have fun here. So I thought that I think that the Jake stuff feels really rudderless to me. It's like it feels like it's the worst kind of Star Trek story, which is just like, all right, let's do something for Jake. Let's bring in a magical alien. So what's Jake's thing? Oh, he wants to be a writer. How about this thing makes him a writer, but it tries to kill him? That's good enough. Like that feels like the extent of what they wanted to do with that storyline.
Yeah, and it's not even like set up particularly well. It's not like Jake has writer's block or is really struggling with an idea or is trying to
got rejected from Pennington or whatever that institute is that he keeps talking about.
Yeah, he's doing totally fine, and then this chick is just like, hey, would you like to come to my quarters and I can quote unquote inspire you? And he's like, oh yeah. yes ma'am. And like at the end after also Ben was a little too nice about the fact that Jake insisted on this trip to Beta Z or wherever they were going, which sounds like it was probably a lot of work to set up.
Yes.
And it's his only shore leave and stuff, and all of a sudden he's like, no, I'm gonna stay here and really work out this story. I would have been. I mean, I guess there's only so mad you can get at somebody, but as a dad, but that's the situation where you're like, get on the fucking ship,
right,
Jake.
Yeah.
You're not staying here by yourself.
You're never gonna make it. Get a real job.
But yeah, it's like she's not. And at the end, when everything kind of comes out and whatnot, it's not like the talk that they have at the end. I went back and I watched it twice because I had kind of zoned out the first time, and I was like, oh, well, this is probably where they're going to get out all of the thematic stuff that they didn't seem to address at all in the actual episode. And it wasn't. It was like it was just Ben and Jake, and Ben's kind of like, this is pretty good. Your spelling's bad, but it's a good start. And, take a couple days off and maybe come back to it. You got a pretty good book here. And he's like, thanks, Dad. And that's the end of the episode. Like there was no wrestling with the fact that it was a book about his dead mom.
Yeah.
And also that I really like that was like, well, it's kind of autobiographical. It's about a guy whose mom dies. It's not about that. It's about that. And like that, none of that stuff is really talked about at all. Usually they can save a lot of these plot lines by having that scene at the end where they kind of voice the internal machinations when the internal machinations don't really come through.
Yeah.
But this one, there was nothing.
Well, even the I didn't really understand so this alien does this to all these great creatives. Keats is the person that they mentioned that we would know. The other names are alien names. But so she's been inspiring these people to sort of draw out their greatness, and that kills them. Why are we supposed to believe, and I think she implies this, that Jake was willing to give up so much that he would die before his work was even published? You know what I mean? Like what was the relationship here where the other characters apparently lived long enough through this process to publish and do all their stuff, but Jake was willing to die. And I thought that they could have tied that into his mother's death. Like, is the urgency to write this book is what's fueling him to sort of kill himself in the process, but they don't really do anything with that. It felt a little bit flimsy. I thought that both plot lines I would describe as flimsy. If you sort of look at what is supposed to be holding them up right there, it's the fact that the timeline of how this thing kills you and what it gets out of it and what's the pros and cons of doing this seemed a little bit weak for me. And we'll get to the Odo stuff when we get to it. But the Jake storyline it was a lot of like ASMR talking and her rubbing his head, and just it didn't do anything for me. It didn't highlight or exemplify the Sirach Lofton's strengths as an actor. It wasn't really about anything. I thought it was kind of silly. It felt to me, as you were saying, very season one. Like it's a concept alien that comes in that isn't really a great idea, and they just went with it. Yeah, and there wasn't even like much tongue in cheek as to what it represents. Like I was, as I was watching it, I was thinking jokingly like, oh, is she just trying to steal the copyright for his book? This is kind of like a metaphor for like the early days of publishing, where it's like, yeah, come on, kid, we'll publish anything you want, but we get to keep all of it. Sign this contract.
And they didn't even, what's that?
Sign this contract before we go any further.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to give me $100 for all my songs, Mr. Berry Gordy? You know, that kind of thing. But yeah, the writers, usually when they do that kind of stuff, there's a little bit of tongue in cheek from the writers about what it means to be a writer working in a system or something like that. And I feel like the opportunity could have been there, but they didn't take that, and it was just, Jake getting a mind boner. I was curious though, at what age does random nosebleeds become worrisome? Because I remember as a kid that I used to get just random nosebleeds all the time. And I did not, there's one time that I fell asleep on the couch and I woke up in a puddle of blood. And
there was a dead body next to me, but it was all.
Well, it was one of those things where like I was getting nosebleeds, and my mom had just bought a new couch. And it was the summer, and we only had air conditioning downstairs, so I wanted to sleep downstairs. And she's like, do not sleep downstairs on the new couch. You're going to bleed all over it because you've been having nosebleeds every night. And I said, Mom, do not worry about it. I've got it under control. And the next day I woke up, and there was just blood everywhere. Luckily, I was on a pillow, and none of it got on the couch. Otherwise, there would have been even more blood everywhere, and I would not be here today to tell you this amazing story.
Amy still gets nosebleeds all the time. Amy gets them as an adult.
Okay,
Our 2-year-old just started getting them. I think it's the heat. Like the heating dries out the air when we turn it on, so his nose bleeds occasionally.
Yeah. But like right now, I don't know if it's just that, as I'm getting older, I'm becoming more paranoid about my health, which I 100% am. But if I were to just get a random nosebleed right now, I would lose my mind. Like I that's not something that happens anymore. And it's also shorthand for like horrible sickness in most things that you watch. It's like remember in the X-Files where every now and then Scully would just have random nosebleeds, and it's like, oh yeah, she's got alien cancer. Yeah.
The only more worrisome one is more difficult to show on TV. Like if you're bleeding out of your ass, you're basically halfway into the grave, I think, at that point. Yes. But they can't show that. It's a shorthand. It's
the less aggressive shorthand than the one where it's just they cough into a napkin and they pull it back and there's blood on the napkin, which is also a good one.
Yeah. No, I don't have. Nosebleeds are kind of like vomiting to me. I don't remember the last time it actually happened to me, and I'm sure it could happen, but it seems like it's something that happened when I was younger, and I don't really get it anymore. But yeah, no, Amy still gets them occasionally. It's the heat for us. It's when the cool weather comes in, the heat comes on, it dries out the air, your nose cracks, and then you just start gushing blood.
Yeah, that happened to me all the time. Like I used to go skiing, and I would be fine outside skiing. But the minute I stepped inside of like, the concession area, it was just like blood all down the front of my thing. And I was like, oh, this is excellent.
That guy's a fucking skier right there. Let's see here. So there's not much else really to talk about that Musey character or the Musey storyline.
The actress is Meg Foster, who
you know her?
Yeah, she's. I know her from two very specific things. She played Evil Lynn in the live-action Masters of the Universe movie with Dolph Lundgren.
Okay. And
she also was the female lead in They Live, the John Carpenter movie.
Oh, nice. Interesting.
She has she's one of those actresses who has very I remember her because she has very striking blue eyes. She has like one of those, like, you see her and you just kind of like, oh my God, those eyes they're weird. And I think, no, I'm thinking of somebody else. I thought she was also in Farscape, but I think that's a different woman.
Well, she's all voice in this. That's the only thing that I take away from it is her sort of ASMR-y, goofy voice as she's talking.
She very much has that, like, has that late 80s, early 90s late night cable sultriness.
Yeah.
And I'm sure she was in all of those shows. I'm sure she had a recurring guest spot on Silk Stockings.
Yes.
Can we do a Silk Stockings podcast?
I know the coverage is demanded to make some Silk Stockings references, I think, just because I remember the ads more than anything.
Yeah, me too. I don't think I've ever watched that show.
So the Odo and Lwaxana stuff. You hadn't seen Lwaxana. The only thing you really need to know is that Odo and her started off combatively. They've kind of mellowed over time, and Odo has kind of turned to her, as they show in this episode, as she is someone very close to his heart. So it's been a nice little arc. Lwaxana is not one of my favorite characters, but she's been okay here. And the thing that she's referencing at the wedding where Odo's like, she saw me in my real form, was there was an episode early in the first season where they get stuck in an elevator and Odo has to revert to his goo form every 16 hours and he has to do it in the elevator. He's embarrassed to do it. And she is very understanding and she holds him in her dress. She like makes her dress into a bowl and he melts into it.
Kinky.
Yeah, kinky stuff. So that's what he's talking about here. I thought this was fine. If it felt slightly goofy for some reason, like it felt a little bit farcical or not the tone that the series usually does now. But there's the shot at the beginning when the cold open closes of Lwaxana's like, I'm pregnant, and they do a close up of Odo and he looks up and down with this like goofy over exaggerated motion. It felt very much like that, and I thought it was good. It's a heartwarming, I suppose. I don't mind it. It's just I sort of get hung up on the logic of this, how this species functions with their childcare. It was distracting to a point where I can't really connect with what's going on screen, which is fine because I'm thinking of the problems of how this actually society functions.
Yeah, and it's a society in which marriage is very much a male possesses the female kind of transaction.
Yep.
And you become the possession of your husband and your husband's property, basically. But you can annul it if you just get married to another guy who seems to be convincing that he loves you a lot.
Yeah.
They're
very honest
sure
critics.
That's not how that works.
Very honest critics. If your wife goes off and marries some other guy and you're just like, you know what? He gave a pretty good speech. I'm gonna let him have her.
Yeah. And the thing with the kid was very strange, where it's like, no, it's the husband's kid. It's not your kid. And he was very cool about that too, where he's like, have a good life. And
that was
when our son asks about me, tell him I was a fighter pilot or something.
I found the disregard they had there for his feelings to be almost amazing, sort of. Like, I actually have a big problem ethically with what has happened here. So Lwaxana Troi marries into a species where she knows this is happening. I guess she takes him at his word that it's not going to be the case if they have a kid, but then when it's a boy, he's like, oh, never mind, I want to go through my society stuff. And then she takes the kid away forever from him. It feels, his ending feels really tragic to me. It's like your kid is gone. They seem to have a society where they don't really care about the relationship as opposed to like the the law of it, kind of, which maybe I'm not supposed to feel so bad, but I was sort of heartbroken for that guy at the end too, where it's like, Jesus, she took his kid away from him, and he's never going to see him, and it's a happy ending. We're told that it's a happy ending.
Yeah, all around, I think the emotional state of all the characters involved, it couldn't be brought into question at the end. Yeah. Also, that guy is Michael Ansara, who is the voice of Mr. Freeze, who we've seen previously as one of the 3 Klingon warriors.
Oh, Mike. Oh, is he? Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I was thinking of someone else, but you obviously looked at the wiki for this one. You were very invested in who was going on.
I actually didn't. I just knew both of those actors.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's fine, I guess. I don't really have a problem. What did you think? Like, did you like the Odo and Lwaxana resolution? Did you think it's appropriate for those two? You haven't seen Lwaxana in a while, so what's it like seeing her on a DS9 station?
She was fine. I didn't actually, I actually didn't like her as much because she wasn't as vibrant as she usually is, to put it that way. She's usually a little bit louder and a little bit more out there, but she seemed pretty subdued here.
They had that great scene where her Beta Z sadness is overtaking the rest, and everyone's depressed in the bar, and Worf is just staring at his face.
That was amazing. Worf's face in that scene was unbelievable, and it's like you could see inside his mind, and he's just going, "Brandon Lee was so young when he died."
Would you like to go for a walk? I would. Yeah, they're getting really good at doing that kind of stuff. I like that there was a lot of little Betazoid touches I like there, where overwhelming Betazoid sadness can infect everyone else. And I really found it touching that she has a line where Betazoid mothers can sense the feelings of their babies, which I thought was like kind of a amazing, profound little line, because she says that the babies are very content. I just thought that was a really interesting insight into them as a species. I thought it was good writing.
Yeah. But yeah, I not having seen the relationship previously, and the fact that Lwaxana knew about Odo's feelings toward Kira, I actually, at the end of the episode, when he was giving his speech at the wedding, I thought that they were doing a thing where it was like he was actually talking about Kira.
Oh,
so
I
didn't realize that they had this, really close relationship previously. So it didn't confuse me, but it did. I didn't exactly see. I didn't appreciate what they were doing there. However, I will say, man, Odo is like the most mercilessly friend-zoned character I've ever seen in anything in my entire life. Where in this one, he pours out his heart, and they literally get married. And then she's like, "Well, thanks for doing that. I mean, obviously you were joking, so I'll just, I'm just gonna go." And he's like, "Okay."
Yeah. Yep. Can't ever be finding any sort of stable happiness for Odo, I think. Yeah, it is a. I mean, do you think that works for that character? Like, I feel when you watch a series like this, and there's so many episodes, and then you realize that they hit the same beat a lot of the same time. Like the characterization only goes so deep, so they sort of hit the same point over and over again. I feel like I felt that a lot with Data in the later seasons of TNG. It's like, how many times are we going to have an episode where Data doesn't know what it means to be human or something like that?
Right.
And it's funny because that's the whole point of the character. But Odo, I wouldn't have thought that Odo being in a relationship would have been a defining characteristic of that character, but it's turning into that kind of a thing. And do you find it? I feel like there's a lot of ways you can go with Odo, and a relationship wouldn't be one of them. They sort of started it on that path, and they have to continue it. But I don't know. What do you think? Does it suit those two characters, or do you find that Odo is mischaracterized in this episode?
No, I think it suits Odo, actually, because his people are literally are beings who are defined by the way that they interact with each other, and they're all part of this like one big goop pile, basically.
The Great Link. Yeah, the Great Link.
Yeah. And he is more or less permanently removed from that. So he's operating on a level of loneliness that I don't think anybody can really comprehend.
Right.
So it makes sense to me that they would lean into him being sort of desperate on some level for a relationship. I don't know if it needs to be romantic every time. I think you can go lots of different ways with that. But I think maybe a romantic relationship is probably the easiest fallback to do.
Yeah.
But I do think it makes sense that he would be so desperate for that sort of companionship. Yeah,
it's interesting because his characterization is kind of the opposite. Like, he's kind of an angry loner character. But as you're saying, that their species is built on being this like interconnected closeness to it. So it's kind of, I wonder, like, I don't know if they haven't touched on this yet, but like why Odo is the way that he is. Is it a product of the way that he was like raised in that Bajoran lab and sort of tortured as a specimen while they were trying to figure out what it is? Or is it are all the changelings like this? If you separate them, do they become this kind of like grumpy nature? It's something worth thinking about, but I agree with you that Odo, being in a relationship, and to tie into the changeling thing, the changelings are also defined by who they're talking to because they take that form usually. So they're sort of like, if they're talking to someone else, or they're more they're sort of fulfilled in a way by their interactions with others because they are formless in and of themselves. So when you pair them up with another character and you put them into a relationship is really when you sort of get the relevance, the thematic relevance of what those characters are. And they do it in stuff like Paradise Lost where they are a threat in that situation. But here it's more about you needing something else to complete you, to take like your full shape of whatever you want to be. And for Odo, it's the hole in his heart, basically, that he's desperately trying to fill.
Yeah.
Let me see here. I think that's, I mean, I find Odo slightly miswritten here, if only because I don't know if it's the tone of the episode. Like, is this supposed to be a comedy? At least their story?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's one of the tough things. Because I think Lwaxana generally lends herself to comedy. And on the page, I feel like it could have been written as a comedy, but misinterpreted as not a comedy.
Right. The wedding scene in particular, I feel, could have gone that way.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about the cold open, because the cold open, having Lwaxana show up and be pregnant, is like, you can go the way that they did, which is kind of like, bum bum, or you can go the way where it's like, oh, Lwaxana, what have you gotten yourself into this time? You know?
Yeah, what have you gotten into yourself this time? Oh, yeah, we're just on a roll, roll here. We have fun.
We do.
No, I see. I kind of agree. Like, it almost feels weird to the Lwaxana character if you're not having a very funny moment. Like, it feels like the script is borderline comedy, but they are really reining it in to have this sort of heartfelt thing that usually in Lwaxana episodes, the heartfelt moment is just the last scene with her. Like, it's kind of a farce until you get to the last scene, and then she says something profound and we all move on. But here, I guess it's just her overwhelming sadness. And add Lwaxana to the tragic list of Star Trek characters who everyone is dying around her. Basically, like her husband, her firstborn child, this kid is going to be taken away from her. But yeah, she's probably viewed as less just because of how obnoxious she can be in early TNG anyway.
And she's got no kids left after this baby.
Yeah. Does Deanna disown her?
No kids.
No kids. None showing up until the ending of Enterprise, I don't think. Yeah, it's I don't know. How would you fix this episode? Is it fixable? Do you care enough? Or is this a, as we're doing these 26 episodes in a season, you certainly see when the room starts to run into trouble about what they want to do. They tend to hit a breaking point around like the 16th or 18th episode, around that point.
Yeah, it's almost like 26 episodes is
too much,
impossible to pull off.
Because I imagine what happens here is you have enough ideas to open a season. You can probably come up with a couple to sort of fill in the spaces as you're going, and then you know how you kind of want to wrap up the season, so you have ideas for the last handful. So it's the later teens into the early 20s are the problem area, and we've kind of hit a little bit of a problem area.
I would like a writer from this era of TV, excuse me, to just like kick down the door at any Netflix writer's room and be like, you have to do 13 episodes. That's literally half of what we had to do every single year. And you get to do like 13 episodes once every couple years, maybe.
Yep.
It's what? How come you can't pull 13 episodes of fucking Daredevil together that are all good?
Yeah, I know.
Like if you could pick 13 episodes out of any series from the mid 90s that was like decent and have like a really fucking good season out of that.
Yeah.
If you pick 13 episodes of the X-Files, it would be the best show on television, even more than it already was.
Yeah.
So like to have all of these writers' rooms going that are like struggling to get between 10 and 13 episodes, and they're like, well, if we had 6 episodes, we'd be able to really do something special. Like, fuck you. These guys were working their asses off, and they were still pulling out stuff that was better than, TV is generally better now than it was before. But you know what I mean? It's like, that's why the fact that these seasons were 25, 26 episodes long is insane.
Yeah.
And the fact that they were decently good is even more insane.
Well, what's funny to me is the break. There's only really a 2-month break between the seasons because of how many episodes they have.
Yeah.
And that feels crazy compared to today, where you wait, over a year sometimes for the next series of Game of Thrones to come out or something. Like they kept churning them out. There was really no break. It's almost the fact it's not even 26 episodes in a season. It's 180 episodes over a 7-year period is almost the way they have to think about it. Like because the churn never stops. They got a mild break every once in a while, but otherwise it's just the same thing. But go ahead.
That sorry, not to go on an old man sounding television rant, but like that mid-season break they do now drives me fucking crazy.
Yeah,
because it's I mean, I shouldn't say that because I understand it to a certain extent. Like, some of the shows still do these big long seasons. Like I know the CW DC comic shows I think are close to like 20, 22 episodes or something like that. Mm-hmm. And they're doing lots of special effects and lots of fighting and stuff and lots of sci-fi stuff. So I understand why they need a couple months or like a decent break in the middle to regroup. But like every single show has a huge break in the middle now.
Yeah.
And it's good to have time to regroup and look at stuff, but at the same time, it's like, well, how come the second half of your season is generally not better?
Generally any successful drama series will now use its last season as 2 seasons. They'll split it into 2.
Yes.
I guess that started with The Sopranos, and The Sopranos interestingly did it as a way to avoid renegotiating contracts with the actors, I guess.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It was a money-saving technique that they did. Or they called it the same season so that they didn't have to renegotiate new years for the actors. Even though
that's pretty sneaky.
Yeah, even though David Chase says he considers the 2 halves of the last season of The Sopranos to be 2 different seasons.
Well, yeah, you can say that now.
Right. Right. It's fairly sneaky, but now they do it as a way to I think they do it mostly as a way to just drum up hype about it.
Yeah.
So they'll draw things out. Let's see. We've gone for half an hour though. So is there anything else you want to talk about the Muse, or should we just wrap this thing up?
I don't think so. To circle back to whether or not Odo is miswritten here, I would say maybe a little bit because he seems all too willing to go along. I mean, this was his idea.
Yes,
and
that feels like a comedy.
Like his idea. Yeah. This seems like it would be Lwaxana's idea.
Yes, yeah.
And you'd have to. I mean, that's the fun of the episode is figuring out how to talk him into it. You know.
Yeah, the ease of which he involves himself is a very comedic thing to me. Like in a drama, I feel like he would have to be pushed for half of the episode to adopt this stance, and because of a comedy, he needs to sort of cut to the conflict right away. You can't have time dicking around getting there. So it feels like he just sort of absorbs the conflict immediately and that's a very comedic beat to me. But then the rest of the episode is very dramatic, so it's kind of a conflicted tone.
Yeah, and you asked how I would fix it. I would probably, I would add any sort of direction to the Jake Sisko stuff, like I was saying, whether he's got writer's block or is struggling with stuff about his mom or whatever, something to what's the word I'm looking for? Something to
Like had a little drive to his,
or to excuse his. It would have been nice to get more of that story too, where maybe the stuff that she's doing to him is causing him to emotionally freak out or something, like he's becoming very volatile or something like it.
Yeah.
But just give him more of a, clearly this is sort of a metaphor for an internal struggle that he's having.
Right. Well, the problem is he is totally unaware the entire time that anything is happening to him. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
He is not making the choice to go through this life draining experience to amplify his work. He is thinking that she is really just like a great massage therapist who is like inspiring him to write as well. So you don't learn anything about Jake's drive because Jake is ignorant to the sacrifice that he's making.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I think overall, the problem with these two stories is that somehow neither one of them get enough time.
Yeah. Which one's the B story?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it would have to be they both start before I don't know. That's a tough call. I mean, I would say, nope, you can't even, I was going to say the Sisko one, but the name of the episode is The Muse.
I feel like the Odo story was intended to be the B story, but it feels more emotionally impactful than the other story. So it flips it a little bit in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. But they both kind of get equal time. Like, honestly, this would have been a good episode to do one of these stories, and then have your B story be like, I don't know, O'Brien and Bashir fucking around playing darts, or something where you don't have to dip into it too much.
Right.
So
Very
the other
easy.
thing has so the other stuff has time to breathe, because I don't think either one of these storylines gets enough time to really do anything interesting.
Yeah. I'd agree. All right, so let's take a break. We're going to play an audio clip. Me and Clay are going to come back. We'll read some patron thoughts and give our final thoughts for The Muse.
You've read it?
I just finished.
What do you think?
You've got a good start on a novel here, Jake. The dialogue is sharp, the story's involving, the characters are real. The spelling is terrible. I especially like the father.
Remind you of anyone?
A bit. It's really good.
I know. I just wish I wrote it.
You did.
How can I be sure? I mean, without Onaya.
Listen to me. You wrote these words, not her.
But she got them out of me.
Which means they were somewhere inside of you.
All right, everybody. So if you leave or if you support the show on patreon.com/the Pensky File, you get to leave your thoughts about upcoming episodes. We read them on the podcast. Holly McLaughlin says The Muse, the Jake Onaya stuff is meh. The Lwaxana Odo stuff brings much more depth to both of these characters, and it's nice to see Odo regain a little dignity by doing something besides mooning over Kira, even if he loses it at the end by not being willing to speak up about how he really feels, at least how it seems like he really feels about Lwaxana. I also love the wedding rules for the baby daddy's culture. And the next thing...
Quick question.
Go ahead.
Is the name of the book that he's writing, is that anything... Does that mean anything? It was like Anslem? Anslem. Is that a thing?
Yeah, what is it? Hold on a second here. Control F. What was it? Anslem?
Anslem, I think.
Yes, it is Anselm. Let me see what this link is. That'd be good to know. It's the first novel. Anselm. I don't think so. It seems to be just made up for him. It's his first book.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if that word had some meaning that was
it ties
extrapolate.
It ties into The Visitor, right?
I was gonna say, is that the name of the first book, like that the person who comes, his fan talks about or something?
Yes, that is the book that his fan was talking about. So they tied it in there. This is the book that he writes from that. So that ties into the Visitor storyline.
Okay, that makes sense.
Which is fine. There's nothing deep about that, but that's a nice little touch to do that, I suppose.
Yeah.
Zam Nuclear Wessel says the Muse slow, quiet, but pretty touching considering it features two often overlooked characters. I like how the end ties into the Visitor. There you go. One of the several times in the series that Jake's new path is a variation on his old one. For the second time, he might have died a one-and-done writer. That's a good point. Next one.
That's a very cynical way to look at it.
It is. Poor Jake Sisko. Just needs to get laid. The Muse, Neil Brennan, feels more like the snooze. Oh, the jokes just keep coming, guys. Keep coming. First stages.
We have fun.
First episode in ages I've been happy to just have on in the background. Felt like a backward step for the show the second Lwaxana turned to reveal her baby bump. Will Yates says, the Muse, I used to avoid this episode like the plague, and aside from a few moments, I think that I will stay the same. Meg Foster did a pretty good job as a pseudo-sexual space vampire. I don't think she would have to trick or hunt for artists the way it's portrayed here. Having known some artists, I could easily see a few of them trading a shorter life for longer recognition. Worf was pretty good in the bar scene, but which was otherwise a train wreck. Finding out about Odo's inner feelings helps the character, but it was a real clunky way to do it. It was nice to see Lwaxana's first husband put all that one-on-one coaching from Yul Brynner to good use, though. Kyle Barrett says, the Muse, I find parts of the Odo-Lwaxana relationship kind of sweet, but apart from that, it's all pretty rubbish. And I don't believe Odo would ever play a game of changeling hide and seek with a smile on his face like that. It seemed very out of character. That's a good scene, too, for what I'm talking about, Clay. I guess we're led to believe that Odo is most comfortable shape-shifting around Lwaxana, right? That's what we're supposed to draw from that. She's the character that he doesn't mind showing do that, which he's very hesitant to shape-shift in front of other people.
Why does speaking of shape-shifting, why does her hair turn blonde in that scene?
Good lighting.
Because is that what it is? Because her hair is like very dark. And then that scene specifically, I realized her hair's like bright yellow or like just very clearly blonde. I don't know.
Maybe it was one of the dress she was wearing. You know, that internet thing where people are like, what color is this dress? Maybe it was one of those things. Maybe it's just the color of the stuff in the room is causing her hair to look like it's a different color. Sure. Yeah, why not? We'll go with that. After Jake's private ASMR session with the forehead lady, I was expecting...
Do they have mood hair? Do Betazoids have mood hair?
They should be a culture built heavily around mood rings and stuff like that. Or those mouse pads that you can touch and turn them into different colors.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
I was expecting Jake to delete the story he had written, wanting to write it on his own terms. It should have been like Paul Sheldon at the end of the film Misery, burning the book written under the influence of Annie Wilkes. Is it Wilkes or Wilkes, I think? Or like the end of the novel.
I think it's Wilkes.
Wilkes at the end of the novel, where instead he publishes the book he hates himself for it. Sorry, Kyle, I'm screwing up the language here. Instead, Jake picks the most boring parts of both by keeping what he's written and not feeling that bad about it. The episode is a turd, but I wish the ending had picked a stronger path for Jake than a quick shrug and continuing to write without giving it much thought. Last comment. Go ahead. Sorry,
that's another thing that's weird about it too. Is like the book that he writes is not particularly like that good. The whole thing is her like pulling this greatness out of these authors, and then when Ben reads it, he's like, "Yeah, it's not bad. It's a solid first draft.
It's no Keats. It's a solid first draft." I was thinking someone needs to Photoshop that scene where Jake, like they keep showing the close-ups of Jake writing in his stuff, and you need to have him just write in a sentence that says and then Captain Lorca reveals that he's from the Mirror Universe.
Yes. Yeah.
Matthew Ross, last comment says, the Muse. God damn it. Do we have to watch this? A combination of fascination and second sight. Stop it. Lwaxana pregnant. Sounds like a bad talk show, and Odo's look is all, it ain't me, girl. Look, his look was the high point. Why go to DS9's police? Hell if I know. Stupid. I wanted Odo to say when they were walking, now he knew, Jesus, my brain is fried. I wanted Odo to say when they were walking that he knew why she was so effed up. As to Jake writing being influenced by a more mature woman, although a teenage fantasy makes it seem he's got nothing and cheapens his ability. Onaga. Is that the Onaga just gets off on smoky voice talking in younger men. I need another coffee. Star Trek Cougars on the next DS9. Oh yeah, write the first line. Bow chicka bow wow. Couldn't she just give Jake clothing advice like a different seat cover? Casual clothes. Matt, I think I'm going to start blaming this on you. I'm losing track what's going on here. Casual clothes from Star Trek need a makeover. Anyway, let us dive into this episode from canon and all memories. So say we all amen. That's it. Guys, thank you very much for writing in. Thank you for leaving your thoughts about the Muse. The bad episodes always tend to get more than the actual outstanding episodes. Go ahead. What are you laughing about?
Sorry, I do really like that idea of Sisko reading at the end, being like, it's okay. I'm a little bit. I don't know if the Klingon Empire would really be threatened by saying you put a bomb in one of their volcanoes, but it's not bad. It's it needs a little work.
So, is his body a Klingon, or did they do plastic surgery?
Yeah. This is why I never show you what I write, Dad.
It's a prequel. It expands the universe. That's it, guys. Thank you very much for writing and leaving your patron thoughts. Apologies for my poor reading, but I'm brain dead apparently at this point. So leave some upcoming thoughts about. We've got some good episodes coming up. Not to spoil anything for Clay, but we do have some very solid episodes coming as the season wraps itself up. For the Cause, To the Death, The Quickening, Body Parts, and Broken Link are all that we have left in season 4. I'm going to say right now, if The Quickening is not about what I think it's about, then I will also be done with this show. Yeah, it's a lot to ask. We'll have to see if they can make things, if they can so blatantly use something from Highlander and not actually have it pay off.
Methinks I smell a crossover.
Patron thoughts. Thank you very much, guys. So, Clay, what are you going to give this one on our scale of 1 to 5?
2.
Yeah, solid 2, right?
It's not incomprehensible. It's actually, everything in it is fine. It's just not very good.
Yeah, I'd agree. Everything in it is fine. It's just not particularly very good. Or half. I think the Odo stuff is. Would you agree the Odo stuff is the stronger storyline?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think if they had focused on the Jake storyline and not really fleshed it out, that's a 1 of an episode because it's not really about anything at that point.
Right,
but the Odo storyline kind of saves it here, which brings it up to a 2 for me. But still, this is probably the worst episode of the season for me so far. You would come into the episode saying that you thought that was the case.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, that's a pretty good average if this is the worst episode, because it's not a train wreck. It's just very underwhelming.
Yes,
so it's better than seasons previous that we've run into.
Yep, 100%. All right, guys, thank you very much. You can support the show by going to all the social media. The traditional cliche ones are Facebook and Twitter. You can also go to Discord if you want to talk to us. That's a good place to go. It's a Skype-like chat room. Go to the Discord channel. There's a link for it in the podcast description or the little video blurb. You can go to patreon.com/thepenskyfile if you want to support the show. It's patreon.com/thepenskyfile. A couple dollars a month to get extra content. We are going to be doing not Tombstone. We're going to be doing Unforgiven as our Western-themed episode this month. And then there's other videos and other random stuff that you get there as well. And then we will wrap it up with just saying rate the show on iTunes. If you have a chance on your phone, that's the easiest way to do it. I think we're at 50 ratings, which is my goal. But anyone else who wants to sort of add another one on there, feel free. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Can we spend the second half of the podcast for the Patreon podcast doing a review of all 3 Unforgiven Metallica songs?
100%. Well, now you've wanted to start a podcast on the Discord. You're talking about starting a music video review podcast. Where
I think that would be a fun show. Specifically like metal videos from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, because I think there's a lot to talk about.
Well,
there.
I was trying to think of how we'll say this and someone will just run off with it and become a hit success. I was thinking of how you would actually do that show. Like, would you do it as a Beavis and Butthead thing where you talk over the episode and you have to wrap up what you're talking about by the time that the song is over? Or would you play the song in the episode? It's something to think about. Like, I feel that there's a lot of untapped potential in somehow linking the music video to the podcast. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. So like you're doing a commentary so you could watch the video and then also listen to the podcast, that kind of thing?
Yeah, like if you played it over like one of those riff tracks or something, would that make sense? Or would it be better to sort of slow it down and break it down? I don't know. I was just thinking because I thought that was an interesting way to sort of link the two things together.
Well, I think the problem you run into is copyright stuff, because I know the Yacht Rock podcast, they play the music that they're talking about underneath they're talking, but they have to do it at like a very low volume so they don't get flagged.
Yep.
Which is kind of
more a problem on YouTube than it is on
MP3s. And it's kind of it's a little bit annoying because like you want to hear the song they're talking about, but you can't really hear a lot of it because they're talking over it.
Yeah.
But I guess it does make you want to go out and find the song. I think I would probably just do it like we do most of these other shows where,
just talk about it.
Just talk about it. Because, I mean, there's enough. Most of these videos have enough weird shit going on that you could get a pretty good conversation for, 20, 30 minutes out of it.
I would want to expand it beyond metal, I think, just for diversity's sake. But there could certainly be if you alternated music videos each week, it would be like you'd go on your metal run or whatever. And I'd be like, I've been listening to a lot of Steve Vai records lately, and I'd like to talk about
that
this
video, man. Oof. Oof.
So guys, let us know what if you'd want to see a music video special every once in a while. We could maybe do a test thing. You do it for Patreon or something. We just see how it works. And if it's like this has legs, or this is the worst thing that we've ever done before. Let me see here. So I think that's it. Guys, thank you very much for supporting the show. And thank you for listening. Clay, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're almost done with season 4, Clay. We're slowly churning our way through these things. We will be done shortly. Let's see. I think that's it. Guys, thank you very much. We'll be back with For the Cause, which is the next episode coming up. And until then, I guess we'll see you next time.